everyone, and welcome to the channel, and Happy New Year! It's 2025! With the final season of Arcane airing at the end of last year, I couldn't resist creating a doll inspired by the style of the show. It's acted as such a massive source of inspiration for me in so many different ways. You know, from the sculptors to the performers and the art style, the directing, the music, just so many different places. I'll be creating my version of the character Jinx. This project will involve creating a doll completely from scratch, creating a completely unique body, a one-of-a-kind head, as well as painting and crafting every detail from scratch. Why don't I do this to myself? Because this project is so big, I will be splitting it up into various videos, but for today it's going to be sculpting the head, painting and creating the wig. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video if you like it, and comment. I love reading all your comments. And with that, let's get into the video. To plan this project, I've been using Milanote, which is a tool for planning and organising your creative projects. Using Milanote for my Jinx doll has been such an asset in the creative process, as it's designed to act as a visual mood board. Milanote lets you organise your ideas the way that you think. I'm a very visual thinker. I tend to just have sticky notes all over my house. I have photo dumps with thousands and thousands of images. So I just kind of like to have everything just out and just visual. So I'm able to actually replicate that on my Milanote board. Being able to drag and drop and cluster and stack different elements brings clarity to an otherwise very chaotic workflow. So this is the front page of my Jinx board. I've included the 3D model sculpted by T-Ball Granite, as well as quick links to his ArtStation portfolio. With everything linked on this board, I'm able to have a quick and easy way of accessing high-res work instantly without having to have a million tabs open, which is, I'm guilty of that, I think. You see that? 76. God. Is most of it archive of my own? Maybe. One of the internal boards I created was the design board that will be useful for sculpting and painting. I've laid the reference images for Jinx's animation rigs along with my guideline sketches that I'll use while I'm sculpting. Also on this board is everything I need for the painting stage. I have my preferred references from different scenes, paired with an itemized list of paints, my painting guide, as well as fleeting notes that I want to remember. I'm also able to sketch directly onto the board for visual reminders like this, and add elements like colour swatches, which you can sample directly from the board. Something I personally enjoyed was the variety of templates that you can choose from, which you can browse through and find the perfect fit for your project. While the mood board approach definitely works when it comes to the painting and designing stage, when it comes to the planning of a to-do list, I needed a little bit more structure. I was able to use their craft project timeline template to create an itemized to-do list and timeline. This kept all my notes and ideas organized, whilst also having that visual form of organisation that I really love. Creating a new board is super simple. Just drag the board icon from toolbar straight onto the page. Here I'm going to make my wig board. Using a craft mood board template, I can customize this the way that I want. Just got both words wrong. It's embarrassing. I wanted to see if I could add a video tutorial from Pinterest and just adding a link, putting the link in, and nice, it plays too. Adding some inspiration pics from other styled wig cosplays, and a link to Sarah Spaceman's cosplay wig tutorial on YouTube that I really liked. Add a to-do list, and here we have it. A board just for the wig section. Milanote's real-time collaboration feature also allows you to share your boards with collaborators, which is such a valuable asset when you're working on projects with others. If you would like to try Milanote for yourself, you can sign up with my link in the description below. Milanote is available for free with no time limit. Perfect for creating your own unique creative hub. Thank you so much for Milanote for sponsoring the video, and time to get sculpting. When I plan out face models, I like to make a reference sheet of the side profile, front profile, and maybe like a third quarter turn. This is like a roadmap which will keep the details consistent and prevent things from going ugly and weird. Once I have that, I load it into Zbrush and I can get started with modelling. I like to start by importing a basic head model and then using the Move topology and clay brushes to fill out the main shapes of the head. At this stage it is rough and ugly, and I don't particularly like to record a lot of the early stages because it just stays ugly for a very long time. But I captured what I could, even though I cringe every time I look back at earlier footage. Using the reference sheets in the earlier stages is almost invaluable, especially when you are trying to replicate a style that isn't naturally your own. It's just kind of lays the foundation work and makes everything a little bit easier. When designing Jinx for Arcane, the animation studio for Teach created two distinct face models for the Jinx powder rig to alternate between. This was done as a visual signifier for when Jinx shifts between her assertive and dominant Jinx persona and her more vulnerable powder self. When it came to my design, I had to decide whether I wanted to lean into Jinx's sharp and angular features or Powder's softer and rounder face. I'm a sucker for the powder model. I think the design is not only very beautiful, but it's very endearing to see a character with such multifaceted emotions. I'll be getting into that a bit later on. But in replicating the powder style, this means incorporating features like a slightly smaller and recessed chin, wide eyes, soft and round cheeks by adding fat to the buccal area of the face, which is the section between your cheekbones and jaw, reminiscent of her Act 1 child self. As well as the head, I also made a body. I'll get into the details of this in the next video, but for now I'm going to just export everything and start printing. Once the models were printed off camera, I cleaned them in a bath of methylated spirits and gave them a bake in my UV curing oven. Not particularly the most interesting thing, so I decided to omit that from the video. But yeah, these are the models that I have, and I just need to prep them for customization. This means making sure that none of the supports are inside the model, and then buffing and sanding everything to make sure it's all nice and smooth and polished. To get started with the customization of this doll, I'm going to start with the head. This was a really long process, so in this video it will be the face-up of the head and the rest of the painting will be in the next video. So, first things first, start with a thin layer of a spray paint base. I'll be using Citadel's Wraithbone. While Citadel Wraithbone is definitely the same shade as Jinx's skin, it unfortunately doesn't have any of the pinks and blues that is needed to create a pink-based skin colour. When creating a skin colour, you have the red, the blue and the yellow. If you have a warmer skin tone, it will lean more towards the yellow and red, but if you have a colder skin tone, it will lean towards the blue and red, because the temperature of these colours. But Wraithbone doesn't have the pink or the blue, so it doesn't work very well for a skin tone unless you want to be a dusty beige. To add the new base colour, I'll be using an eyeshadow brush from e.l.f. These brushes are dense enough to hold paint while buffing it nice and smooth for a really nice and flawless even surface without having to add too much paint. These are perfect for this kind of work in particular, and they're only like $5 from Kmart, so definitely would recommend it. To begin the face, I started shading with soft pastels on a Q-tip and dabbed gently into areas like the corners of the eyes, the nose and along the brow bone with a very pale and cold-toned brown. This step helps in mapping out the face and giving me a clearer idea of where to build up depth and dimension. Eventually it was time to start sketching, so I will be using my watercolour pencils for this. Sticking to a very light shade, I will be just setting the foundation that will allow for mistakes without having to commit to darker colours as of yet. Roteach definitely has a unique style to their characters, which I and so many others have fallen in love with. The mix of a stylized realism with the abstract textures and shadow lends such a striking beauty and unique style to their animation. I don't think there's a name for it just yet. It's been used in other media like Spider-Verse and Love, Death and Robots, and has been referenced as living painting style, but I'm not sure if that's the official name. When it came to attempting to replicate this style in our 4D world, it was a bit of a challenge. Definitely had to grapple with the age-old struggle of, oh, what do you mean I can't get this perfect the first time? Kind of managing my expectations on what I can do, because, I haven't done this before, but also, it is a difficult style to replicate. For me personally, trying to replicate this style meant having a very strict and small list of paint colours and constantly touching my face, as weird as that is, to memorize the muscles of our face and where certain things should be placed, if that makes sense. This art style leans so heavily into the placement of facial muscles and the lack thereof, and placing highlights and shadows closely together for dynamic high contrasts. When it came to replicating this style on my model, I just want to be so careful in not adding too much shadows to the face, as it can make the face very uneven so quickly. It would look too over-defined, I think that's the right way of saying it, and look less a part of the organic nature of the face and more like something that has been put onto the face. This is something that I find is so easy to fall into, and sometimes I have to just step away and then come back and be like, no, this needs more, this needs less. Because you want to make sure that this looks natural but stylized. I personally found it quite challenging to know how to make the abstract style look intentional. It was definitely a kind of trust the process kind of thing. Having intentional brush strokes and lines and not blending them out was such an itch that I wasn't allowed to scratch. Frequently throughout media, the quote-unquote crazy character is reduced to nothing more than a MacGuffin to the story, necessary to the plot as it sets the characters in motion, but ultimately is irrelevant in itself. Be it characters with complex mental health challenges being reduced to cliches, or as a hollow archetype like the manic pixie dream girl. Again, existing solely to serve others' narratives, rarely are they given depth, complexity, or even their own agency. Jinx in Arcane, however, breaks that mold. Her story is told through her perspective. We see her mania and her obsessions, her hallucinations, both visual and auditory, but we're given something so important, which is context. We as an audience throughout the story have been privy to her life and her experiences, thus making the hallucinations and the obsessions not something that is used just as a quirky thing. It is used as a way to further understand what it is that she is thinking in her head and why she is acting certain ways, which is just fundamentally, I don't know, it's just like, is so important, meaning that she's able to be not defined by her psychosis, it's merely something that she experiences. And that's so powerful. Psychosis can often be demonized and misunderstood, but through Jinx, with Arcane, we're given a nuanced and respectful and empathetic lens in which to witness it. But also, it's not the main narrative. Again, it is just simply a part of who she is as a character. Forteach and Riot Games put so much thought into Jinx's design and her story. Her psychosis isn't just surface level and used as a plot device, it's done quite holistically. And this has served as the reason as to why I went with the design for my doll as I have. While you see Jinx and the representations of Jinx being in figures and cosplays and such, it's quite frequently her chaotic and manic persona, but through Arcane we are given a complex character, and I wanted to have that in my design as well. I wanted to have the design be more vulnerable in her visual design. She has, the powder face model, but fundamentally she is Jinx. But yeah, that's just kind of like why I wanted to lean into that side, because we are able to experience this character in such a multitude of ways and experience her completely, if that makes sense. Again, not being defined by her psychosis, she is just herself. Time to move on to the hair. I've been really interested in stylized cosplay wigs recently and thought it would be fun to try make one for this project. Long story short, it's not fun. Stylized wigs are definitely less fun when scaled down. The first step in making the wig was to make the wig cap. I ended up making this monstrosity. It's fabric covered in PVA glue for the basic form, and then I used glue from a glue gun to make a layer that is hard and sculpted to the head, and I painted it blue. It's very ugly, but you're not going to see it, so it's fine. When it came to planning the hair, I had to think about how I was going to make a stylized wig, but also how I'm going to place the wefts to make sure it's styled properly. So the first step was to section the scalp into the areas that will be unique pieces for this wig. I split the scalp in half for the pigtails and then made a section specifically for the fringe. To start with the application, I'll start with making the middle parting. To make parting wefts, I typically just heat hair with either an iron, a hairdryer, or hot water, and then just grab the end of the glue weft and just turn it on itself. and then adding a weft inside to thicken it and hide the glue even more. Jinx's fringe is quite stylized. It sits almost vertically and then swooshes dramatically around her face. Replicating this on the wig was done by meticulously cutting and shaping and styling and drying the hair over and over and over again. The best tool I found to make these shapes was strangely ribbons that allowed me to keep the sections separated while they dried, but also drying it so it's framed to the face, but yeah, not sticking together. When it came to actually making the pigtails, oh my goodness, I didn't know why it was so difficult. I think the combination of wanting to have the top head hair very smooth and have not even a strand of hair out of place, but also needing to mold the hair into large plaits was just really difficult. It did take a lot of tries. I know this looks like the easiest thing ever, but it just took a really long time. Ooh, what an intimate setup we have. It's really, really hot in Sydney. Like, oh my gosh. I was not able to work in the day at all, so welcome to my midnight workshop. In this section, I'm just adding the accessories to the hair. Jinx has a combination of metal charms that she places throughout her hair. While I did try to use Warbler, which is a heat-activated material that you can sculpt, I found it didn't translate well. It just didn't look like metal and just didn't look very good, so I cut those off, and instead I substituted it for a faux leather. The strips were easy to attach to the hair, they were thin, they can be painted, but also allowed movement to the hair, which the Warbler just did not allow. To paint the leather, I use a combination of Citadel paints and Vallejo liquid metals in liquid gold and silver. These are really pigmented. I've never used them before and I was quite blown away with the pigment. I'll be using just a Q-tip here just to dab the liquid metal on top of the paint. So I want quite an uneven application because I wanted to go for that natural ingot look of the metal because obviously she uses scraps to create a lot of her inventions. So I wanted to make sure that that looked like scrap pieces of metal. Once the wig was nice and set, we can now start adding it to the head and just basically assembling everything together. So I just want to show you what we've done today. So taking the wig off the practice head and putting it onto the painted head. Once everything is all together, this is the final head and face. I think it looks nice. I'd love to know what you think. Again, I will be doing the rest of the customization and the rest of the painting in the next video, so make sure to check that out. Thank you so much, Milanote, for sponsoring this video, and I will see you in the next one.